Okay, so we will continue chapter 11. This is Bio 131, chapter 11b. And we're starting here from the diet and how the diet affects our health. Um, and the first thing that we need to learn is when you eat, what are you eating? What's going to happen to it? And why do you need to breathe in order to burn what you're eating and get energy out of it? So the first definition here is what's breathing. Breathing is an alternation between inhalation and exhalation, which is you breathe in, you breathe out. In, you breathe in, inhalation. You breathe out, exhalation. Sometimes you call it inspiration, expiration. The surface of the lung is huge, even though the size of the lung, you can see it within your chest wall. It's a little bit less than the size of the chest wall, but practically speaking, there's huge folds and huge sacs and spherical structures that's making it huge. If you spread it, it's huge. And that's to make the exchange that we will talk about. Your goal is when you breathe in, you breathe out. This is just a mechanical movement. So you breathe in, air moves in inside your respiratory system. And then you breathe out, the air containing carbon dioxide is moving out. Air containing oxygen or containing more oxygen moves in. And when you exhale or expirate, air containing a lot of carbon dioxide is breathed out. This is the mechanical part. But between in and out, when you breathe in, the air is loaded with oxygen. It will go all the way inside through this huge surface. Oxygen is going to cross these membranes known as the alveoli. We will talk about it. It will cross in, and carbon dioxide will cross out. So oxygen cross from the lung, from the smallest part of the lung, which is that huge surface alveoli. It will cross into your blood, the pulmonary circulation. And then the carbon dioxide will leave the blood, the capillaries from the pulmonary circulation into your alveoli, to your lung, and then you exhale it out. You do that exchange in between those two parts. Inhalation, exhalation, but what's in between? It's the exchange. So if you look at this, you breathe in, the air that you're breathing in is loaded with a lot of oxygen. It moves in from the nose and moving down to the pharynx, to the larynx, to the trachea, to the bronchi, and so on. It starts to branch exactly like a tree. Look at an apple tree, and it's the opposite way. It's upside down apple tree. Look at an apple tree. We will see a big trunk, and then like two divisions, and each one of the divisions will break down or divide more into two, three more divisions, and it will divide smaller until at the end you will see an apple that's connected by a stem, a small stem. This is exactly the apple is the alveoli at the end. So put this apple tree upside down. This is exactly your respiratory system. So you're going down from the trunk, from the big nose, pharynx, big, the larynx, big, trachea, big, and then start to, after that, after the trachea, this is your trachea right here. This is the larynx, which is the Adam's apple. Under this is the trachea. After the trachea, it will split into bronchi, primary, secondary, tertiary bronchioles, all the way until you go to the alveoli. So here you are at the end, at the bronchioles, and you're going to the alveoli. The last part, the apple. This is like the apple fruit. So what's going to happen here? Air moves in loaded with oxygen, and oxygen will leave the alveolar sac, which is like the apple or like a ball or a sac or something. It will cross the membrane of these alveoli and go to this blood here, to the capillaries of the pulmonary system. So it moves out of the alveolar sac to the capillaries of the pulmonary system. Because why does that happen? Because the air that you're breathing in is loaded with oxygen, while the blood inside your body is coming after the tissues and after the cells took the oxygen already. So this is oxygen poor blood, and this is air loaded with a lot of oxygen more here. It will cross, go to the capillaries. At that same, of course, all of that will take like a second or maybe 2 seconds. At the same time, carbon dioxide is more in your pulmonary capillaries because it's coming back from the tissues after they took already the oxygen from that and they loaded it with carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide will leave out to the alveoli, which will go to the duct, bronchioles, and will go the opposite way until you breathe it out. So these surrounding the alveoli are called the blood capillaries. So where the exchange happening in order to get the oxygen into your blood and get rid of carbon dioxide out of your blood across what? You move from the capillaries to the alveoli. This is the carbon dioxide here. And from the alveoli to the capillaries, and across the alveolar membrane, which is the membrane of this sac, the cover of this sac, and between the membrane of these capillaries. What are these capillaries? These are pulmonary blood capillaries. The capillaries are the smallest of all, the smallest of your blood vessels. What conditions can happen to these alveoli? You have a lot of these alveoli. If you spread it, it will be huge surface area. It's just because it's folding and it's, like the apple in a tree, it doesn't look that big, but if you peel it off all these covers and you spread it, it's huge. This is exactly the alveoli. So what could happen to your respiratory system so that it doesn't do the function that's supposed to do? There is something called emphysema, and emphysema always come from tobacco smoking, cigarette smoking, from air pollution, whatever. Things go in and irritate these alveoli that you're supposed to do the exchange through, breaking it down, destroying it. So now you're losing your alveoli. Your lungs are going to become bigger, but this is not something good, because with healthy alveoli, it has a normal shape. But if you lose it, nothing to hold it in that shape, it will expand. We call that emphysema. You can also irritate, whether your cigarettes or infection or whatever, you can irritate your bronchi, which is after the trachea. You can have infection in the upper part of your respiratory system or the lower part of the respiratory system. People can get asthma, and I think we're familiar with that. These passageways, especially the small ones, can get inflamed or as an allergic reaction, and they contract, so making it harder for the air to move in and out. Um, so this is one side, which is a respiratory side. Remember, we're talking about oxygen carbon dioxide exchange, and our goal is to get oxygen in and get carbon dioxide out. When oxygen goes in, it will travel to the cells. The cells will pick it up. The cells will also pick up glucose, and they're going to burn glucose using oxygen. Remember, if you have a fire or something, and if you wanted to stop that fire, you put like a blanket or something, because you're depriving it from oxygen. So oxygen is used for burning things. It's kind of not exactly the same, but your cells take the glucose with the use of oxygen. They are going to burn the glucose. It's not really burn, it's called metabolizing it, to break it down into smaller pieces and get energy out of it. As long as you have energy, you survive, you're alive. And this is the whole goal. So the respiratory part, we talked about it. Now the cardiovascular part. Cardio means heart, vascular means vessels. And vessels refer to arteries and veins combined. Arteries plus veins. What's the arteries and veins? Arteries are the blood vessels that take the blood away from the heart. Veins are the blood vessels that take the blood to the heart. It's all about direction of the blood flow. Are you flowing away from from the heart, out of the heart? Are you taking the blood out of the heart? Your artery. Are you taking the blood into the heart? You are a vein. So here it is, artery and vein. So look at the arrow. So let's say the heart is here. The heart is up here, and the heart is pumping the blood after coming from the lung loaded with oxygen. It's going to load it to pump it into these arteries, big arteries, small arteries. It's branching just like the same as we mentioned in the respiratory system, just as another tree. You start with the heart, with the aorta, which is like the trunk, the big, branching, just like a tree, until you get to these small arteries, after which you have arterioles. This. So this is artery and arterioles. The blood is moving out of the heart to the arteries. Big arteries, mid-sized arteries, small arteries, branching. The smallest is arterioles, and the smallest of all is capillaries. These are the capillaries. This is the arterioles, which is like a stem coming from the arteries. And the other stem to get it to the capillaries. And then the other stem that take it out of the capillaries to the veins. And look at the color. This is red because it's coming from the heart oxygenated. It's coming oxygenated from the heart after going through the lung. And it will pass through until it go to the arterioles, to the capillaries, to the venules, which is the stem between these capillaries and venules, and veins, I mean, and the vein will return it back to the heart. And then what? When it go back to the heart, it is not oxygenated anymore because right here, look at this, right here at the capillaries are in between the cells. So oxygen will leave the capillaries, go to the cells, and carbon dioxide leave the cells and go to the capillaries. Okay? This is like a truck coming to you loaded with food. And they will tell you, look, I'm bringing you food, eat it, and when you're done, give me the trash to take it on my way. So you take the food, you eat it, and then you put the trash bag on the same truck, and the truck will take it to the dumpster. They're gonna dump it, and then they are going to load with another food and come back to you. Then you take the food that you want. They are waiting. You eat the food. You have remnants, the packages or any remnants beginning. You're going to throw it back on that trunk, and the trunk will take it back to the dumpster and then take it back to be loaded. And this is happening all the time. So the truck here, which is the blood basically, that's coming with oxygen, moves down arteries, large, mid-sized, small arterioles to the capillaries. And this is where you are located, the cells. And they will tell you, the capillaries will tell you, take your oxygen, take your nutrients, you take it. Give us carbon dioxide and waste products. You load it back, and then it will go back to this. So why this is happening? Because at this point here, the oxygen will leave the capillaries, go to the cells. Here are the cells, from the capillaries to the cells. Nutrients, which is most importantly glucose, will also do the same thing. Go to the cells. The cells will take the glucose, use the oxygen to burn it, get energy out of it. And this is the goal. But while doing that, there are waste products, which is most importantly carbon dioxide and other waste products. They are going to leave, which is this arrow here, the blue. They're going to leave, go back to these capillaries, but now it's on this, the venular side of the capillaries, it's high carbon dioxide, low oxygen. Here, it was high oxygen, low carbon dioxide. But you take the oxygen and you load it with carbon dioxide. So by the time it leaves, it's full of remnants, the trash. It's called the waste products. And they'll go to the veins, will go back to the heart. When it go back to the heart, it will not circulate back, of course, because it's not good anymore. This blood is poor oxygen poor blood. Will go to the heart will send it to the lung to get oxygenated, as I mentioned before, and then we'll go back to the heart. When it go back to the heart, it go to the right side. This veins go to the right side of the heart. The right side will send it to the lung, and it will say to the lung, take this blood, it's loaded with carbon dioxide. Get rid of the carbon dioxide, reload with oxygen, and come back to me to the left side. So you go back to the left side, the blood come back from the lung to the left side, and from the left side to the aorta, large, mid-size, small arterioles, and the same cycle repeats over and over and over again. But most important to remember here is veins, arteries, arteries, arterioles. This is the arteriolar side of the capillaries. This is the venular side of the capillaries. But all of this, one cell thick. The thickness is one cell only. It's very tiny to allow the exchange. If it is thicker than that, oxygen, carbon dioxide, and waste products and nutrients will not be able to cross it. It has to be very thin so that they can cross it. So this is called the capillaries, venules, and veins. So this is what I just mentioned. Here it is on this side, like here. When you go back, you go to the veins. And then what? This is what I just mentioned. It will go back all the way, the opposite of what we mentioned here. So from the venules to the veins, small, mid-size, large, until it go back to the right side of the heart, right atrium, right ventricle. And then what? This is not a good blood. The right side of the heart will pump it out to the lung. The exchange that we talked about will occur. And then it will come back. We call this pulmonary arteries. From the heart to the lung, pulmonary arteries. You do the exchange, get rid of carbon dioxide, gain oxygen, and then you return back through the pulmonary veins. Wait a minute. This is pulmonary artery. Why did you call it artery? Because it's carrying the blood away from the heart. The definition applies. This is anatomical definition. Any blood vessel that takes the blood away from the heart, that's it. You have to call it artery. But this artery is unique because this is the only artery in the body that's carrying deoxygenated blood. So this is the only blue artery in the whole entire body. You will see all over the body systems, you will see the arteries are red. This is not the rule. It's not about red, blue, high oxygen, low oxygen. This is not the rule. This is secondary. The number one rule is direction of the blood. Are you taking the blood away from the heart or to the heart? Away from the heart, back to the heart. Away from the heart, that's it. Irrespective of any details, you're an artery. Back into the heart, you are a vein, irrespective of the contents. But it happened that 90% or maybe 70, 80%, the arteries are red, which is all the arteries in your body. This is the only exception. The other exception is during pregnancy, and we're not talking about those, the umbilical vessels, and we're not talking about those now. I'm just talking about an adult or just regular anatomy. So the arteries take the deoxygenated blood from the right side of the heart. It goes from right atrium to right ventricle, and right ventricle is the one that's going to pump the blood into those two pulmonary arteries. It's deoxygenated. Go to the lung, do the exchange, and then come back from these veins, but it comes to the left side. So you leave through the right side, go to the lung, do the exchange, and come back to the left side, which is the left atrium, left ventricle. Here it is, left ventricle. Now it's oxygenated because it came back from the lung. And then go to the aorta, ascending aorta, aortic arch. And then it will go like large, mid-size, small arterioles, capillaries, and then go back venules, small, mid-size, large veins, back to the right atrium, to the right ventricle, the pulmonary trunk, to the pulmonary arteries, to the lung. We do the exchange. Pulmonary veins back to the left side, which is left atrium, to the left ventricle, to the aorta. Aorta, large, and then mid-sized arteries, small arteries, arterioles, capillaries. Here is the exchange. Oxygen go to the cells, carbon dioxide come from the cells. Oxygen actually and nutrients, unlike in the lung. In the lungs, the exchange is only oxygen and carbon dioxide. Here is oxygen and nutrients leave, carbon dioxide and waste products come back. to what? To capillaries, venules, small veins, mid-sized veins, large veins, which is superior inferior vena cava, to the right atrium, to the right ventricle, to the pulmonary trunk, and so on. I'm repeating just to help you understand. But if you notice this part here between between the right or here between the right ventricle and the lung and coming back, so it's between the heart and the lung. This is called pulmonary circuit. On the other hand, from the left side to the tissues or the rest of the body and coming back, we call that the systemic circuit. These two circuits alternate all the time. Blood is coming back from the rest of the body, from the tissues, deoxygenated, the right side of the heart. Right side of the heart to the lung and coming back. We call that pulmonary circuit. Now it's back to the left side and it's oxygenated. Will be pumped out to the tissues and come back. This is systemic circulation. From the heart to the lung and come back, pulmonary circuit. And then from the heart to the tissues and come back, systemic circuit. So you go always alternate like this. Heart, lung, back to the heart, to the tissues, back to the heart, lung, back to the heart, tissues, and so on. And this is happening all the time. There are a couple of conditions here that it's good to have an idea about, which is what's the blood pressure? The blood inside our vessels is exerting certain pressure. It's making certain pressure. So it's pressing on the blood vessels. And this pressure can be measured by sphygmomanometer if you measured your blood before. And it's two components. Like they tell you, your blood pressure is 110 over 70, for example. 110, this is the high, 70, this is the low. We call it systolic and diastolic. It should be within the normal range. If it goes above that, we call it hypertension, which can be due to a lot of conditions. We are not going to go through the details. But hypertension is bad for the heart, can lead to heart attack and brain stroke and so on. Heart diseases can happen because of blocking of the vessels that we talked about, like arteries or veins, but more of arteries. So less blood will go to certain areas. Anemia is blood itself. We do not call anemia because you have less blood. This is not true. The definition is blood not carrying enough oxygen. That's it. Unable to, because you have low red blood cells, maybe. Because your red blood cells are not functioning, maybe. But you're not doing the job. You do not have enough oxygen carrying capacity, which is mainly hemoglobin. Just a little bit of an idea about that. So if you look deeper into the heart, you will see the following. These are the largest veins. This is called here superior vena cava, bringing back the deoxygenated blood from the upper part of the body. And this is the largest vein bringing the blood. Both of them are the largest veins. But superior vena cava is the one that's bringing back the deoxygenated blood from the upper part of the body, which is the part that's above the heart. And the inferior vena cava is bringing back, this is the largest vein, bringing back deoxygenated blood from the lower part of the body, which is under the heart. But both of them at the end, they will pour that deoxygenated or oxygen poor blood into the right atrium. From the right atrium, the blood will leave and go to the right ventricle. From the right ventricle, and there is a valve in between those, which is called tricuspid valve. Will go to the right ventricle. From the right ventricle, when the heart contracts, the deoxygenated blood, this is important here. Remember, superior and inferior vena cava bringing what? Deoxygenated blood from the upper and lower parts of the body, respectively. Superior vena cava from the upper part, inferior vena cava from the lower parts. Now you're bringing all that blood deoxygenated into what? Right atrium. Right atrium deoxygenated. Will leave to the right ventricle, still deoxygenated. You didn't do anything. You didn't go to the lung yet, still deoxygenated. And that's why they make it blue like this. Passing through tricuspid valve. Then what? Then the ventricles contract, and this deoxygenated blood will leave and go to the pulmonary trunk, which is this. Sometimes they call it pulmonary artery. But as you're doing that, you have to pass through. When you move from any part to any part, you have to go through a valve so that you move in one direction and you don't go back. So here you go through tricuspid valve. Why? Because you want to go from right atrium to right ventricle, and that's it. You shouldn't go back. If you go back, no more blood can come here. You have to move away so that more blood can come, and you don't come back. Now it's a right ventricle, pumping the blood out to the pulmonary trunk, which is this part, which is this big trunk here, passing through what? Pulmonary semilunar valve. It will split into right and left pulmonary arteries. Right pulmonary artery go to the right lung. Left pulmonary artery go to the left lung. So far, still deoxygenated until you reach the lung. At the lung, and we talked about it when we talked about the respiratory system like a few minutes ago. The exchange will occur, and carbon dioxide will leave, go to the alveoli, and then you breathe it out. Oxygen leave the alveoli and get inside the capillaries, and then it will go back through those, the red. These are called pulmonary veins. You don't see this, the details, but I'm telling you from the back, you don't see it, but all those four will come here, left atrium. They pour the blood into the left atrium. From the left atrium, the blood will leave and go to the left ventricle through this valve, which is called bicuspid valve or mitral valve. And then the left ventricle, when it contracts, actually right and left ventricle contract at the same time. I'm just describing it because both of those happening at the same time. It moves at the same time. From the left ventricle, passing through all these white are valves, and I talked about the valves. Now it will leave. It goes under this. You don't see it. The blood is leaving through this. What is this? It's going to the aorta. So this is aortic valve, actually aortic semilunar valve. Going to the aorta. Ascending aorta, aortic arch, descending aorta will distribute the blood throughout the body, loaded with oxygen, will contain nutrients, and the same cycle repeat over and over again. But the basics here are right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium, left ventricle. Now, the heart is always contracting to push the blood out and then relaxing to gain the blood again. Control, push the blood out, relax to get more blood. This is happening all the time. The scientific name or the physiological name for the contraction is systole. The anatomical name for relaxation is diastole. Systole, diastole. Contraction, relaxation. Systole, diastole. So here is systole, contract, look how the blood is leaving. Relax, look how the blood is coming back. You contract again, the blood is leaving out, leaving the heart and going out. And then you relax, the blood collect again, and so on. We always alternate between those. Now the heart itself is working automatically. We call that automaticity. The heart is beating like this. You're sleeping, it's beating. Okay, even if you're in coma, it's still beating because it works by itself. We call that automaticity. I remember in medical school, we had, in order to prove that, we got like a frog or a rabbit or something, I don't remember, and we actually hold that heart and we cut everything and we took the heart out of that frog and we put it on the table. That was first year. And guess what? The heart, we cut it completely. We have only the heart outside of the body. And we put it in the table and the heart is still going like this, still bumping. And then after some time, and then stop, slow down, stop. Stop just because there is no nutrients and oxygen going to it. So if you somehow give it nutrients and oxygen, it will continue to do that. What's the explanation of that? Because the heart is kind of like wireless. Like if you have a wired tool vacuum cleaner, okay? It will not work without the wires. But if you have a vacuum cleaner with battery, it work without plugging it in. If you take it out, you can put it in your car and you go somewhere and you can use it. So what's that battery inside the heart? It is the SA node, sinoatrial node, SA node. It's because it's between the atrium, which is this, and the sinus, which is the first part of the aorta right here. Sinoatrial node, SA node. This is your pacemaker. It make the pace, like charge, charge, okay? Signal, signal, signal. We call that the pace. Let's say it's 60 per minute. Let's say heart rate is 60. It goes like every second. Signal, signal, signal. If you look at seconds, signal, signal, signal. It gives you these pulses, very regular. We call it rhythm. And this is what we call it the automaticity, and we call that the sinoatrial node, the pacemaker. And then what? And then you already created a signal, electrical signal, and look at this yellow. It's going to leave and spread through the arteries until it go to another node that's called AV node, atrioventricular node. So I explained why did we call this sinoatrial node. Why did you call this AV node, atrioventricular node? Because those two here, both of those are atrium, right and left, and those at the bottom, right ventricle and left ventricle, and this is located between the atria and the ventricles. So what do you want to call it? Atrioventricular node. It's a node between the atria on top and the ventricle at the bottom. That's it. So after you spread in the atria, you go to the AV node. Why do you have to go to the AV node? Why don't you just spread to the ventricles? Because you have it like a gate. If the SA node is going fast, like if your heart rate is 70, the SA node is not doing 70. It's doing like 90. And the AV node is doing like 50. It will allow 50. So you end up having your heart rates in between. So it's kind of slow it down a little bit to make sure that you have enough time, your heart have enough time to receive and pump, like a regulator. But at the same time, it also can work like the SA node, but it's very slow. Like I always get this question. What if somebody have an issue with the SA node? They should replace it. But what if until they do something about it, is this person going to die because the SA node is gone for some reason? No, he's not going to die because the AV node is kind of similar to the SA node, but slow. So it acts as a follower, like a manager giving order to the assistant manager. Okay, can the assistant manager make decisions as well? Yes, but under normal circumstances, getting orders. Now, what if the manager is traveling or died or gets sick or something? The assistant manager will step in, will say, okay, I'll do that temporarily until he come back. So he can do the job. But the problem is it's kind of slow. So it will not give them enough blood to function, but they will not die until you take care of it. And then we'll move down from the AV node to the something called AV bundle, and then it will branch until it's spread into the ventricles. The blood, beside going to all the body tissues and organ, it should go to the heart itself. Isn't the heart itself is an organ? Isn't it tissue? Doesn't it contain cells? Isn't these cells need their own oxygen and nutrients just like any other, or just because the chef, does he eat also, or he just cook? He cook and he also need to eat. The heart pump the blood and give it to you, but the heart itself needs to get blood. This blood is coming to the heart through something called coronary circulation. Coronary circulation. If something wrong happened to this coronary circulation, the heart will not get enough blood, will be strained. If it's completely blocked, it's not the whole, like the whole coronary arteries can be blocked. It's like this is extremely rare. Maybe a branch or something. So look at this. If this one's got blocked, but the other arteries are okay. If this is blocked, the area that was receiving blood from that part are going to die. We call that heart attack or myocardial infarction. And listen to this, only if it is completely blocked. Zero blood is passing through it. If less blood, we don't call it heart attack. We call it angina. Angina is partial block. So it's still going, but it's narrow. Why is it narrow? Atherosclerosis, which is fat. Like, look at this. This is the wall of the coronary artery, and the blood is going to the heart. If you're eating a lot of fat and the fat start to accumulate inside, it will make this lumen narrower. Less blood will go. We call that angina. If it accumulate, and here comes something like a thrombus or a blood clot, blocked it completely. The area that was supposed to receive the blood from that artery, only this, not the whole thing, is going to die. So next part is about more details about the circulatory system, which is a cardiovascular system, and the effect of the exercise on that, and the components of the blood itself. So what happens if you exercise? What do you think? What will happen? Your heart rate will increase, pumping more blood to the muscles that are exercising, right? Heart rate increase. And if you're relaxing, heart rate will decrease, and so on. So now the blood. We go to the blood itself. What is the blood? That liquid. Like you're taking, you're making blood test for some reason, and they withdraw some blood into that tube. What is that fluid? The blood. The blood is two components. The fluid part, and this is called plasma, and there are formed elements suspended in that fluid, which is a plasma. Like if I ask you, what's a coffee? The coffee is water, and you add coffee to it and some creamer, and you dissolve it. So water and coffee, which is a solid part. Here, it's plasma and formed elements. What are the formed elements? The cells. And the cells are red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets, three types. Red blood cells, these are the ones that contain inside of which each one of those cells is filled with hemoglobin. And hemoglobin is the oxygen carrier. The next, which is this. Next type is the white blood cells, and it is to fight infection. We're not going through the details now. There are different types of white blood cells that they do different function. This is responsible for virus, and this is responsible, and so on. But generally speaking, we're just talking about generally speaking for now. White blood cells, why do we have white blood cells? To protect us against infection, to fight against infection. What do you mean infection? Any infection, viral infection, virus is invading the body, like flu, COVID, hepatitis. These are all viruses. Bacteria, like any type of bacteria, pneumonia or whatever, even fungus, if a fungus invaded our body, any other organisms that cause infection, these are going to protect us against that. Now, if you look at the red blood cells, I mentioned that the red blood cells are filled with what? Hemoglobin. And this hemoglobin is the one that carry the oxygen. Oxygen attached to the hemoglobin inside the red blood cells. What's a hemoglobin? Just cut it into two pieces. Hemoglobin, 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 heme and globin. Globin is a protein. Heme is the other part that contain the iron and oxygen attached to that iron. So if I ask you, oxygen attached to which blood cells? Red blood cells. Which part of the red blood cells? Hemoglobin. Which part of the hemoglobin? Heme. Which part of the heme? Iron, specifically. The next type, so we talked about red blood cells, white blood cells, and this is just a general biology. So we're not going on deep into the details. We're just having a general good idea about everything. Next cells, we talked about red blood cells, white blood cells, and then the next is called platelets. Platelets are the function of the platelets is to stop bleeding. Stop bleeding. We call it hemostasis. Stop bleeding. It forms a sticky plug, like if you have an injury and you're bleeding. Few seconds later, it's going to stop. Is it fixed? It's not fixed. It's the platelets stick because they make a sticky block. The surface is sticky. It stick itself in that opening in the wall of the vessels to temporarily seal it. So it is to stop bleeding. To stop bleeding. So you don't lose more blood until you fix it. So what else beside the platelets sticking itself there? Because these platelets sticking itself, it can actually move away with the bloodstream. There is something else, fibrous tissue, fibers, looks like this, that will stick on the platelets and including red blood cells as well. So the platelets seal it first. And then these fibers are coming together with some red blood cells and they are going to seal this opening. So platelets just seal it a little bit. And then the fibers is a little bit stronger because it's entangle red blood cells to seal the area. Okay? Until you fix it. Okay? And we're going to stop here. This is part 2 of chapter 11. So this is 11b. And then we will do the last part, which is 11c next time.